This is a story which started from a demon gathering hall, and Brazel informed that a guy, even though that was one of the 4 heavenly monarchs, he was the weakest, and the guy saw others at a time and wondered that among 4 heavenly monarchs he was weakest, and at that day and became known as the weakest. Somehow he was a person who was dismissed with a cuckoo, even though that guy was one of the 4 heavenly monarchs. He was the weakest and became the master of both the hero and the saint. They were childhood friends, and since they were neighbors and their parents knew each other, they always hung out together, and if they were assigned to the same army division, they would start flying up the ranks together before he even knew it. They were the ones who founded the 4 heavenly monarchs, and the 4 of them were always connected by fate. Capsodia asked if he was dismissed from the 4 heavenly kings, and Brazel admitted, and Capsodia asked the reason, and Brazel smirked and mentioned that it was because he was the weakest. Capsodia was stunned and remembered that 1 month ago, when they were at a Demon King's army public relations interview, a problem arose, and so earlier he said the strongest heavenly king was, and contrary to that, Brazel asked who was the weakest one. Capsodia pondered that usually they would have punished him themselves, and mentioned that the 4 of them had done everything together, and there was no way anything like whether someone was strong or weak matters at all, and asked Brazel if he was right. But Capsodia shockingly looked at the Brazel and the Vognes, the earth, and Ruviana the mist pointed at Capsodia. And Brazel and mentioned that even though that guy was one of the 4 heavenly kings, he was the weakest, and Brazel shrieked while asking that who was he calling the weakest, and Vognes stated that he also thought that was the case, and Ruviana denied, and the chatter happened, and those words caused a huge uproar within the demon community, and from that uproar, the talks about him actually being the weakest did kind of start spreading around a little, and Capsodia stated that then it was just a performance. And Brazel mentioned that a weakling like Capsodia like him was able to deceive the 4 heavenly monarchs, and if they also thought of being weak, it would affect the morale of the Demon Lord's army, and Capsodia frustratedly asked what he was talking about and mentioned that it was Brazel's fault. And Brazel burst the upper area and mentioned that his dismissal had already been decided, and told Capsodia to went and grab his stuff and to get out of there. Further, Brazel mentioned that even though all of them already passed level 100 a long time ago, he was still level 1, and mentioned that he was fine getting rid of him. Capsodia turned to leave, and Ruviana exclaimed Vognes, and stated that was because one of the Capsodia's attributes, and Capsodia told Ruviana that's enough. Capsodia mentioned that even though what Brazel did to him was unforgivable, but it was true that he was still level 1, and he couldn't really do any flashy things like that, and as a result, he wasn't able to impress the Demon Lord at all, so he never received his own territory.
Hold on. If you guys are loving this video, make sure to comment, "We are loving it," because that is how I get to know that. Now, getting back to the story.
Ruviana clenched his fist and asked why did he was being such a pushover, and Capsodia asked her if she said something, and Ruviana mentioned that all she said was go to hell. And Capsodia hold Ruviana hands upward and mentioned that was really cruel, and stated that even the heroine would come up with nicer things to say about him than that those days, and Ruviana told him to shut up and to get out of there. Capsodia agreed, and Ruviana was stunned, and Capsodia apologized that he couldn't do anything for her and patted her head and thanked her very much, and she blushed, and so Capsodia the Death Scorpion left the Demon Lord's city behind him. Capsodia was on the way, pondered that if he returned to the countryside, all that's waiting for him was probably just field work, and wondered that besides that what was everyone going to think of someone who was demoted from the capital like him, and kept recalled people calling him weakest, and decided to quit thinking like that, as at least that night he was going to heal his soul with his dog Cerberus. He reached, and while he stating that he was home, he seemed that his house caught fire, and the blast also affected Capsodia, and he got thrown far while pondering what was that. And Bastrine came and asked if he was still alive, and called Capsodia the rumored weakest of the 4 heavenly kings, and laughed. Capsodia asked if he was who burned his house down, and the dragon kept laughing, and Capsodia told him to answer his questions first, and he mentioned that he was one of Brazel the Scorching Retreat Sama's subordinates, Bastrine the Blazing Ruination, and Capsodia mentioned that he didn't care and asked him to answer. Further, Capsodia again questioned if he was the one who burned down his house, and Bastrine mentioned lightened up, and asked if they really let people with rotten personalities into the 4 heavenly monarchs, and agreed that was right, and it was him, and mentioned that it was Brazel orders as well. Bastrine spewed fire, and mentioned to wait while stating that there was more, and explained that once he killed him, Brazel would promote him to one of the 4 heavenly monarchs, and Capsodia stood and told Bastrina that in case, go ahead and die. There was silence there, and Capsodia pointed. Bastrine laughed and exclaimed that Capsodia needed to plan out his threats better, and mentioned that he didn't know that misfiring spells was a requirement for the heavenly monarchs, and asked what Capsodia meant by go ahead and die, and exclaimed that Capsodia was the one going to die. But suddenly Bastrine burned and was at the mark of death, and he was stunned and stated that Capsodia was supposed to be the weakest. Capsodia mentioned that it seemed like he didn't know and explained that all of the heavenly monarchs had their own areas of speciality, and Brazel's attribute was fire, and Vognis's attribute was water, and Ruviana's attribute was wind, and for him, it was death. He noticed that Bastrine was dead and stated that he guessed that Bastrine couldn't hear him anymore. Capsodia wondered that what on earth had Brazel been teaching his subordinates, as he sighed and mentioned that he borrowed that place from the Demon King. And his position was no more. His house was no more, and his beloved dog was no more, and thought that he was becoming more and more destitute. Just then he heard noise, and he turned and spotted Cerberus and blushed out. He plunged over the Cerberus and exclaimed that he was so glad that he was safe, and added that it seemed like the house was going to burn down, so he ran away, and stated that he had a good sense of perception unlike his master. He hugged Cerberus and told him to listen carefully and explained that he was not one of the 4 heavenly monarchs anymore. He mentioned that right then, it seemed like he would be continuously targeted by those guys, and when that time comes, he would have no choice but to drag him into that, and Cerberus whispered. He told Cerberus to choose, and asked if he would follow him despite knowing the dangers that they would face, or would he live at Ruviana's place, the one area that he knew was safe, as he told her that he could entrusted Cerberus to her. While he was adding that no matter what the reply was, Cerberus rushed towards Ruviana's place, and Capsodia was astonished and speechless, and Capsodia thought about Cerberus and smiled. Capsodia sat down and contemplated that he was not sure why, but he went all the way to the humans' territory, and he was facing the power of loneliness. He wondered what did he do from then on, and thought if at that time it was possible him to hide in the humans' territory, and since his ancestors from then generations ago seemed to be human, he became a demi-lich that was half human and half undead, and right then, since his life was being targeted, it might be safer compared to the demon's territory, and he gleamed, and he had decided that he would go to humans' territory. Suddenly, a blast happened, and Capsodia spotted that another little rat has come and stated that day was not his day, and the monster asked if Capsodia was the heroine's companion, and Capsodia stunned and mentioned that he had already dealt with the heroine, and Capsodia told the monster to give up if he was there to defeat him, and mentioned that he was unbeatable. Monster asked why was that, and stated that it was because he had 8 lives, and Capsodia pondered that his soul was able to stock up on other people's souls, and that was probably the spell known as the Soul of Many Deaths, and it was a death attribute spell that lends souls from living human beings, and the process felt just like what the name implies, so painful that one feels like dying, and Monster told Capsodia that it was really a low life. Capsodia asked who he was, and the monster was astonished and asked if he didn't know his name and called it fine. Further, he mentioned that however, then that Capsodia knew his secret. He cannot let him go back alive, and Capsodia pondered that the monster really don't stop talking, and the monster told him to bring him a souvenir from the underworld, and mentioned that his name was Vazog the Mad Death, and his favorite type was silver-haired lolies, and Capsodia wondered how did he even react to that. And Vazog laughed and questioned if Capsodia won't accept his death by his hands, and stated go ahead and die. And Vazog dashed to attack, but he got burnt and defeated in an instant. Vazog couldn't comprehend how Capsodia was able to defeat it and wondered why his 8 souls were dispersing away. And Capsodia sighed and asked what he meant, and explained that even if he had a lot of lives, an instant kill was still an instant kill. Then Vazog burnt completely and died, and Capsodia pondered for him to rest in peace. Then Capsodia thought that the equipment bag seemed to have stuff like medicine and money, and as he was broke right then, he wondered if anything else was in front of him. He picked the equipment, and it was super heavy that Capsodia was struggling in, and he stored it in a magic traveling bag. He figured that equipment was used for expeditions and wondered if that guy lived around there. As well, he wondered what happened to the heroine. He felt that there was the smell of another corpse rotting as well, and contemplated that it was pretty close and he had no choice, so he opened the death note. Inside the death note, the various records of deceased humans were recorded, and Capsodia remembered Vazog's name. And he found that Vazog lived nearby just as he thought, and pondered that there might be something over there. He entered the place and spotted a girl with tied hands, and contemplated that Vazog had been keeping captives there and called Vizog pervert. The girl got scared and shuddered, and Capsodia told her to not worry and mentioned that he was not Vizog, and he inquired if she was by chance the heroine or perhaps the heroine's follower or something, and the girl filled with tears after hearing heroine, and she cried out that heroine got hurt while saving her and was lying over there. Capsodia looked at her and thought that she appeared to be a female demi-human, and judging from the ears and the tail, she was probably part of the Crimson Wolf race, and he touched her and figured that Har was still warm. Then he opened the death note and asked the name of the heroine. The girl replied that it was Paphimia Primal, and inquired what he was doing, and Capsodia looked for heroine name and found it, and he figured that 1 hour ago she was cut down with one swing of the dragon tooth sword, and he added that a little while later her breathing resumed and the heroine came back and spell was working at her, and after Capsodia wrote and used his spell, she coughed in the relief that heroine came back to her life and thought what it could be. And she pondered that just then, that was a spell to brought back the dead, and a great spell that not even a high-ranked priest after gathering 100 people could achieve, and to be able to succeed with neither an altar not with any relics, and she wondered that who the Capsodia was. In the frontier town, Neuville, Capsodia looked at the crowd and the children's and pondered whether that was perfect for his new life. However, he needed to do something about those guys. Euphemia grabbed Capsodia and requested him to take her in as his apprentice, and Capsodia mentioned that he had already told her that he personally was still undergoing training right then, so there was no way he could take in any apprentices. Then he turned and mentioned that was where they parted ways and thanked them for taking him all the way to town, and Euphemia failed while repeating that she didn't want to, and as a dog lover, Capsodia blushed. While Euphemia pouted, Sharon mentioned that she supposed that he was planning to look for a job in that town, and Capsodia agreed and stated that it was the part of his plan, and she snapped her finger and stated that in that case, they would all go to the guild together, and Capsodia asked about guild, and she explained him that it was a place to post and accept jobs, and the two of them were thinking of going there to register as adventurers. Capsodia got excited and exclaimed, "Let's go," and asked if those guys wasn't going to defeat the demon lord, and Sharon stated that they were planning to do that. But Euphemia interrupted and mentioned that while fighting with Vazak, she realized something, that she didn't have enough battle experience, and even if she attacked the demon lord's army right then, she probably wouldn't be able to win against any strong demons. Capsodia wondered that she was right about that. Even from his perspective, Euphemia's potential was absolutely off the charts, and however, she still required a ludicrous amount of training. Further, Sharon explained that because of that, they decided that Euphemia needs to gain more fighting experience, since completing monster subjugation requests and gathering monster parts was a part of the job, and they believed that being an adventurer was the best way to gain experience. Euphemia interrupted and told Sharon that she was wrong, and added that the most efficient was to become master apprentice, and suddenly Capsodia covered her mouth and asked Sharon if she meant that they were going to travel together until they reached the guild, and agreed while stating that only until they get to the guild. Excited, Euphemia hugged Capsodia and cheered that they were going together with Master again, and Capsodia pondered that her boobs were touching him. Sharon started to get going as that had been decided and explained that it seemed to be in that area, and Euphemia exclaimed that it was really fun, and he told her that she was way too loud. They reached the guild and entered, and the receptionist welcomed them to the guild. Capsodia thought that though he had done reconnaissance missions in the humans' territory, that was his first time being there, and he stated that he was looking for a job right then. And Euphemia was stunned and asked if he wasn't an adventurer either, and he admitted that he was not. Up till then, he had killed countless numbers of humans, but right then, he wanted to graduate from the murderous lifestyle, and he just wanted to work at a place that wouldn't exploit him. Receptionist asked if he could tell her what his name was, and when he was about to say Capsodia, he stopped and mentioned that it was not his name, and stated that it was actually Campus with no last name. The receptionist asked him if it was okay if they asked about his academic records, and he was stunned about academic records, and she told him it was as for his qualifications, and inquired which labor unions was he currently affiliated with, and if he had things like letters of recommendations he could present them to. Capua sweat out, and receptionist mentioned that she could guess that he didn't have any on him, and she said sorry about that, and stated that's the case in terms of jobs that she could give him, and Capua interrupted and asked if there wasn't any jobs for him, and she explained that it was not that there wasn't any, and asked how about being the designated cat feeder. Capua asked what does the pay for that happen to be, and she stated that the cat probably earns more than he do, and he contemplating while thanking to her as that was just he needed to hear. And then receptionist told him not to worry and told him that he was going to be fine, and even if he didn't have anything, he could still become an adventurer with just a simple test, and if he could to increase his rank, living in a mansion was a completely achievable goal to have. And while Capua was telling adventure, the two Euphemia and Sharon glared at him while grinning, and Capua stressed and mentioned that he would also become an adventurer, and both behind him cheered. Euphemia rushed and hugged Capua and mentioned that they could have adventures with Master, and he told her to not act clingy in public, and pondered that he was going to plan out his jobs to avoid those two. And the receptionist stated that for the simple test, they was going to check whether he have the qualities to become an adventurer, and told him that he didn't have to think too hard about that. and explained that all he had to do was just hold his hand above that magic device, and Capua figured that was what the test was and thought that was bad and wondered that if the magic that he was granted was appraised as high-ranked magic, then he might be outed as a demon, and Paphimia agreed and mentioned that she would be the first one to took that test. And Capua pondered that then he could see for himself what level that magic device was. Receptionist asked if she also wished to become an adventurer as well, and Paphimia admitted, and she held her hand on the magic device. And the device gleamed, and Capua thought it as a noble color. And there was CL Mord there, and stated that they had never seen anything like that before, and the receptionist stated that they would make their decision based on what the magic device says about their capabilities, and mentioned that Paphimia result was and pondered that just who was she and exclaimed amazing. And Paphimia was stunned, and receptionist explained that the people who had that told about them in the past went on to become heroes and performed many great feats. And in other words, that was the best outcome that had ever been recorded, and Sharon mentioned that moves her to tears and stated to party for 3 days straight. He wondered if she was being serious there, and Paphimia hugged Sharon and mentioned that means that Sharon's prophecy was spot on. And the receptionist asked if she was perhaps the saint of prophecy, Sharon Stone, and Sharon smiled. Then, Sharon stated that the person right there was Paphimia Primal, and she was chosen by her to become the hero, and receptionist apologized for their rudeness, and Sharon denied and mentioned that they was at fault as well and apologized for startling all of them. And Sharon explained that since Paphimia still doesn't have much experience in battle, they were thinking of having her gain experience by becoming an adventurer. And Capua figured that was how it was, and Paphimia asked if they could appraise Master then. And receptionist shocked that he was the heroine's master, and he told her that Paphimia was just simply saying that without thinking, and he thought that how he felt right then. Perhaps he would be fine, and he hold his hands on magic device, and the device gleamed and it flashed heavily. And receptionist wondered what was about with that divine light, and Paphimia exclaimed amazing, and stated that it was just expected from her master. Capua contemplated what that was, and it was quite different from how Paphimia's went. And he looked at the device and was stunned by what it was. The people got astonished that Capsodia defeated the guild master with only 1 blow, and Paphimia hugged Capsodia from back in excitement while stating that it was as expected from Capua. And Capua looked at his palm and sighed that it got away and was disheartened at that time. She asked Capua why was he hiding, and asked if there's something embarrassing happened, and exclaimed that he was the one who did this. And Capua wondered if he did, and thought that he just beat up the guild's big shot, and though they might not seem it like that, they demi-liches was a race who possessed superhuman strength, and since they were half dead, they could use power that was beyond a normal human's limits, and after many generations of getting used to it, liches formed with superhuman strength. Capua contemplated that he was obsessing over that fly, and he accidentally removed his limiter. Capua stepped closer and asked the old man if he was all right, and the one who was thrashed asked Capua why even bother showing his concern at that point. And Mackenzie stated that he understood his capabilities then, and Capua was passed. The receptionist asked Mackenzie if he was okay, and he stated that he saw his life flash before him from that one punch, and pondered that he was a demi-lick though. Excited, Paphimia got closer to Capua and asked him if it was that great, that they could go have adventures together, and Capua contemplated that her face was too close, and Sharon congratulating Capua, and he noticed that her hands was trembling, and he apologized to Sharon and mentioned that it seemed like he scared her a bit, and she denied and mentioned that was not it. And since she was worried about Capua, and he got to know that she was worried about him, and he patted her head and stated that she was a nice person, and she blushed and exclaimed no. Mackenzie flipped a silver coin, and he catches it, and Mackenzie told him to go ahead and take it and mentioned that he was worthy of it. And the people around him got astonished that new guy just suddenly came and received silver ranked, and Capua got distressed and wondered that if he accepted something of that caliber, he was going to stand out, and Capua flipped it while mentioning that he didn't wanted it and exclaimed that it smells kind of weird. Everyone therefore stunned, and Mackenzie shrieked onto Capua while stating that his head must not be screwed on right if he were turning down being silver ranked, and Capua inquired if Old Man was the one with the loose screws, and exclaimed that Old Man was the one who was suspicious about his origins and gave him a special exam, and there was no way Capua would accept the silver ranking from a guy like him, and asked how did he plan to took responsibility after subjecting Capua himself to such abuse, and explained that he was going to start off being iron ranked first just to saw how things was, and he added that besides, he was honestly not confident in himself being an adventurer yet as he was level 1. And Mashenzi got surprised that he was level 1 and Sharon agreed and told Mashenzi that she appraised him already. Capua mentioned that even Saintess said so herself, and stated that his beating Mashenzi was just a fluke, and Mekunzi mentioned that if he put it that way, an old man thanked him, and Paphimia leaped and mentioned that then she was fine with being an iron-ranked adventurer as well, and she was told that it was already been decided that she was going to be above bronze rank though. And Paphimia denied and exclaimed that she wanted to go with Master. Capua turned and told Paphimia that she should become a bronze-ranked adventurer, and Paphimia responded that she wanted to go together with Master, and he told her that she didn't get it, and explained that what her master was saying, that right then it was her time to train her own. For him too, and Paphimia inquired on her own, and he turned and stated that if he were to guide her step by step right then, there was no doubt that she would become reliant on him, and if that happens, he would only end up stunting her growth. He told her that if she wanted to go on adventures with him, she'd have to claw her way to his level first, and he shows thumb up and stated that he was looking forward to seeing her growth. Paphimia's eyes filled with eyes, and she rushed and hugged Capua that she would do her best, and he pondered that it was going as he planned, as he contemplated that Paphimia's potential was absolutely top-notch, and once she had been promoted to the heroine status, and after she gained some more experience, she would have parades at noon and events with the upper class at night, and a glamorous life in the royal palace awaits her, and she would probably end up forgetting all of the insignificant things in her life such as him, and in that time, he would be quietly living a life where he was not explored. And Paphimia told Sharon that she would do her best, and receptionist stated that there was a quest that they would like her to do as soon as possible, and exclaimed that he might be a very difficult opponent for her since she still didn't have very much experience when it comes to battle. And Paphimia exclaimed no problem, and mentioned that she was the heroine who was chosen by Sharon, and Capua smiled and appraised her internally. And he stepped while pondering that it was about time to get going, and he stepped, and receptionist mentioned that he was a man with a hulking figure while still being incredibly smart. Well, he wields a dragon-tooth sword, and on top of that, he excelled at using death attribute magic, and Capua heard and stopped, and further she added that they were told that he possesses 8 souls, and stated that his name was Vazak, and he was a berserker whose level was in the 3 digits. Paphimia and Sharon looked at each other and giggled, and receptionist mentioned that they weren't asking her to do it right then, and she hated to break it to her. Suddenly Paphimia screamed that Vazak had already been defeated, and the people was stunned there and asked if she was serious, and Paphimia agreed and pointed Capua while stating that Master was the one who did it, and the people got shocked there. On the other side, the battle was going, and Ruviana casted her spell Nebula Storm, and she attacked and stunned, and she told Vognes to hurry and to send out the army, and he casted Tidal Wave, and the area crashed, and she asked Vognes what was he doing, and Vognes inquired if they didn't agree that they were just going to kill the humans, and she exclaimed him idiot, and told him to follow the battle plan, and he told Ruviana to not sweat the details, and mentioned that them killing them was all that matters. Ruviana shrieked Vognes, and he replied that he got it, and she thought that the resurrections wasn't keeping up, and Vognes was originally assigned to wreak havoc on the front lines, and just as she thought the job of leading from the back lines was not suitable for him, and if only Capsodia was the one to come up with their better plan, and nobody understands the gravity of that situation, and she remembered Capsodia, and pondered that no matter how busy he was, he would always come to them with the most brilliant proposals, and that guy was the one who made all of the battle plans, negotiated between all of the demon races, and came up with the 4 heavenly monarchs, and they were simply just the extras, and without Capsodia, the Demon King's army would cease to function. Just then, a blast came upon Ruviana, but she was saved by Brazel, and he asked what seemed to be a problem there, and Vognes exclaimed that Brazel saved them there, and Brazel told Vognes to go back to the front lines. Vognes astonished, and mentioned that he wasn't giving out orders at all, and told him to step down, and Ruviana asked who was going to be in charge, and asked if it was perhaps Brazel. Brazel told them to not forget that he was the supreme commander of the Demon Lord's army, and he would leave commanding the army to Ruviana, and she stated that she didn't mind that, and told him not to forget that the Demon King was the supreme commander over all of them, and to make no mistake about it. Vognes asked what was with his attitude, and asked if he was looking down on the Demon King, and he stated that he didn't say anything like that, and now when he mentioned it, that would be correct. Brazel turned, and Ruviana asked Brazel where he was going, as there were remnants of the enemy that still needed to be cleaned up, and Brazel mentioned that he was reporting back to the Demon Lord's city, and there was something that he had to do. Ruviana asked what was the something that was more important than pursuing after the enemy, and asked if he perhaps planning on shutting himself in his lab and finding with his little toys, and Brazel inquired if she really didn't know the value of those toys, and exclaimed that someday she would get it, once they would be completed and they would change the war itself. In Guild, Receptionist told them that quests was generally divided into 3 categories, and the first was subjugation quests, which mainly involve exterminating monsters, and the second was collection quests, such as harvesting magical grass or stones, and recovering relics from dungeons, and the last was help quests, and those involved accepting various requests, and was meant for newbies, and stated since both of them was iron rank, they might choose nay quest, and Paphimia cheered and mentioned that she was definitely taking subjugation quests, and she would defeat lots of monsters and become stronger, and she thanked her. Sharon alliterates something in Paphimia's ears, and Paphimia screamed that she would accept that, and Capsodia raised and mentioned that he was fine with accepting a collection quest, and Paphimia got distressed, and he explained that he was done with hunting monsters. And he changed into mentor mode, and exclaimed that if they were to hunt in the same vicinity, that would stunt her growth, and Paphimia sobbed and exclaimed, "Master." He pondered that demons have the ability to tame monsters, and there were even demons who could see things far away through the eyes of monsters, and there was no way he was going to risk running into them himself. Receptionist asked Capua if he would like to took that magic grass collection quest, and he agreed, and the receptionist responded that there was one thing he needed to know, that if he brought any monsters he encountered during the collection quest back, he might leave them with them, although they were unable to compensate him for bringing them in, and they could buy them off him at market rate. He wondered if it wasn't a red flag. Paphimia and Shorin went to perform the quest, and on the Paphimia mentioned that it should be around there, and she looked at Gov Wolf picture and wondered how strong was it, and Paphimia told Shorin to not worry and mentioned that she would protect her, and Shorin thanked Paphimia and explained that she could also manage the protect wall, and featured it, and Paphimia stated that with Sharon around, it was like they had the strength of 100 men. Suddenly, Gov Wolf appeared, and he plunged to scratch while welcoming them to the power spot of death. But Paphimia came and covered Shorin and dodged the attack, and she counterattacked on Wolf with her sword, and would stated that each of her attacks was heavy, but she was too slow and too inexperienced and struggle harder, and laughed on her. A frustrated Paphimia started flailing, and the wolf asked if she would calm down, and the wolf exclaimed unrelentingly and stated that he was leaving. Paphimia shrieked at him to wait, and he responded that he was not waiting, not stopping, not repeating himself, and he rushed and wondered what was wrong with those flailing girls, as that tired him out. Just then, Wood spotted Capsodia, and he stepped towards it while wondering where did he seen him before. While Capsodia was thrilled that he finally found some Rororu grass and thought that it was the right decision accepting collection quest, as it was quiet without those two and he could find emergency food. And just then Wolf roared, and Capsodia turned, and Wolf stated that he did not thought that he would encounter the weakest among the 4 heavenly monarchs there, and Capsodia, frustrated and disappointed that Guy knows about him, and would shriek that he was Wolf Terra, and Brazel bestowed upon them that name. And he was a servant of hell, and he loved NTR, and inquired if it was trend that someone like him who was banished from the Demon Lord's army would be lurking within human territory, and that was an outright betrayal, and should bite off his head to present to Brazel, and exclaimed him to die. And Capsodia snapped, and Wolf gurgled and was dead. Capsodia wondered what was wrong with those guys, and he was glad he killed him before he reported him in. And he noticed that the quality of magic grass was going to drop better head back, as the guild did mention they would be willing to buy at market rate, and thought that it was going to cover his expenses, and he would come to regret that decision. Ruviana told Brazel that she was off, and he asked her to wait, and she asked what was it. And then Brazel asked if she was free that night, and mentioned that he found a bar that serves really good dragon's head shake, and asked how about they go together. And she denied while mentioning that she had plans that day, and Brazel repeated plans and mentioned that she said the same thing last time and she was just declining, and asked her. And she mentioned that he was the type that gets too held up about the past, and Brazel asked what did she said, and she stated that she was going to be taking care of her pet, because their condition doesn't look too good lately, and he asked Ruviana if she knew what was in his research, and she mentioned that he was researched for chimera toys, and he admitted and explained that he was going to be researching their cells to create even more ferocious beings, and she asked what about it, and he explained that as an experiment, he had already left one loose, and after several days, he would get some essential data, and if he could create some stronger monsters, his power would be unstoppable. Brazel held Ruviana's hand and asked her to pick him over Capsodia, and mentioned that she seemed to have a high opinion on his power, and he was banished as he does not had any more power, and if she come with him, but Ruviana slapped him and apologized and stated that she didn't meant to, and left. Infuriated, exclaimed whatever, and mentioned that in the end everything would be in his possession. While Capsodia was searching, he heard people screaming Cerberus, and Capsodia rushed to meet Cerberus while contemplating that he was coming to visit him and pondered that he would love those fruits he had for him. Suddenly, a sound came and he thought that it would be Cerberus, but he spotted three-headed beasts, and the other adventurer noticed that he was an iron-level adventurer, and tried to stop him and mentioned that it was not an opponent that an iron level could handle. Infuriated, Capsodia mentioned that those guys made him excited for nothing, and he hated how they look. And the beast mentioned that there was only room for three-headed beasts in that world, and it was Cerberus. Capsodia asked if they knew why and mentioned that it was because he had just decided that there was nothing better than his cute Cerberus. And Capsodia cried out inquiring how dare he, and stated that it was time for him to die. And in an instant the beast was dead. That guy was astonished that Hydra Lord had been dead, and Capsodia left the area, while glooming that it wasn't Cerberus, and he remembered his dog while crying. On the other hand, Cerberus was hiding, and was stressed at how it ended up like that, as his previous master would always bombard him with complaints. He didn't want it to hear, and he was an annoying beast, and compared to that, his current master was a nice person, who would laugh and forgive everything he do, even if he so do some lewd things to her, and contemplated how did it become like that. And just then Ruviana came and mentioned that it was time for his meal, and Cerberus whispered and she mentioned that she found him. She mentioned that he was covered in dust and she would have to shampoo him later, and he barked and she asked if he was right, and stated that he made sure to bring some food for him. She offered him food, and told Cerberus to lose some weight, and it was not good to overeat, but it was not good to undereat either, and exclaimed, "Aw daddy." Euphemia was attacking, and Capsodia mentioned that it wasn't enough and stated that she was slow, and asked if it was all that she had got, and contemplated if she threw away her sword. 5 days after training started, Euphemia and Sharon and he trained until she was exhausted and slept in his bed. He spotted Sharon sitting, and she welcomed him back, and he asked Sharon if she was worried about Euphemia, and she exclaimed that she was, and mentioned that she wondered if she had been holding Euphemia back, as she wanted to give Euphemia confidence, but might be there was a better way to go about it, and Capsodia contemplated that she was worrying too much, and he told her to check on her if she was worried about her, and mentioned that it was 6 days, and he was sure she wanted to see her face too, and pondered that if she wouldn't go, it would be bad for him, as in order to protect his leisure time he couldn't just do anything. Euphemia spotted Capsodia and she rushed and hugged him, and he got choked as it was the result of her training. And Sharon appreciated her for good work, and Euphemia thanked her, and they were looking at each other. Just then, a boy came and asked if he was Misteltame's partner, and he mentioned that he was Verdana, and stated that he wanted to give his thanks and thanked her for healing him the other day. Sharon smiled and told him not to mention it, and mentioned that she was glad he was okay, and Verdana blushed and asked Sharon if she likes bread, and stated that he was pretty good at making it. And then he moved to Capua and thanked him for saving him, and he welcomed her. Misteltame asked what did he come there for, and stated that they were in the middle of training, and Capsodia asked that it was wrong of them for checking up on the development of his disciple. And Misteltame stunned and mentioned that he would show him if he wanted to see, and he asked Euphemia about a fight, and she agreed. Then, both Misteltame and Euphemia got ready to fight, and they stated, and she plunged first onto Misteltame to attack. And Capsodia was astonished and mentioned that she was fast, as it had been 3 days since he observed her, but she was gotten quite fast, and wondered how that speed hold up, and she blow to attack, but Misteltame dodged, and both Capsodia and Sharon got excited, and he told Euphemia to do her best and exclaimed that he was right there. Just then, Capsodia noticed that Misteltame was not moving a step, and pondered that her abilities was top tier, and she had the spirit, but it seemed she had no sense for battle and her intuition and spacing, and if he was being blunt, she was not cut out for fighting, and he thought that with enough time and Euphemia would become a great hero. However, time won't allow for that. And even right then, the demons was killing humans. Euphemia rested her hands, and Misteltame asked her what was wrong, and mentioned that the fight wasn't over, and she exclaimed enough. And Misteltame inquired that if it was all she had got, and she shrieked that there was nothing she could do, and stated that she did a lot of quests, and got trained by him, and she even distanced herself from her friends, but she was still so weak, and she cried, and Capsodia astonished that she was giving, and Euphemia stated that she was giving up on being a hero. Ruviana was doing her work, and she looked at Brazel's chair, and she stated that she was going to Brazel's room real quick, and she stepped and contemplated that Brazel's research had caught the attention of the demon lord. He was giving his own office, and originally, it was supposed to be a happy event. She knocked on the door and stated that it was her, and he responded by coming in. She entered, and he asked her what it was, and asked if she wanted her office too, and she mentioned that it would be nice, and stated that she was fine for them. He asked how come, and she remembered Capsodia words, that if they would split apart instead of working together, it would be counterproductive, and being together was more fun. And he told her to just tell him if she even changed her mind, and asked what was her business with him, and she stated that she gathered the documents he asked for and asked if he could take a look. And she presented the papers, but Brazel held her hand and pulled her forward, and Ruviana got stunned, and he asked her if they could work together that day. And she denied that couldn't that day, while mentioning that she had to feed her dog. Infuriated, he told her that she always said that and reject him, and asked if she couldn't leave to somebody else, and she apologized and mentioned that it was just that her dog had been getting sick lately and his weight had been decreasing, and she was worried, and Brazel retorted that he couldn't accept it and inquired if she was defying him, while mentioning that he was the strongest of the 4 heavenly monarchs. Suddenly, other man smacked the door and mentioned that he had a report, and Brazel got infuriated. While he was about to attack, Ruviana told him to wait and asked what was that, and he reported that he had a report and stated that the revised Hydrolord that was released a few days ago has been defeated. Both Brazel and Ruviana got astonished, and Brazel asked if he said the revised Hydrolord, and he patted his head and exclaimed that the chimera he released, and called it impossible, while stating that his power should be 3x stronger than the original, and it should be enough to compete against a rank no one S rank, and asked who did it.